Awesome. Well, I think we might get started, and then hopefully some more people will trickle in as we go along, as they get a chance to see the reading passcode. So apologies everyone for the mix-up that we had around that. Technical difficulties still, even after a year of Zoom meetings. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here tonight. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Sofia Linfield. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be your host for the evening. I'm currently working with the Nova Scotia Environmental Network as their Information and Communications Manager and studying sustainability at Dalhousie University. And I'm so excited to be here with you all tonight. But before we go any further, I would like to take some time to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1725, and the treaties do not deal with the surrender of the land, but did set out the rights and responsibilities that settlers and Mi'kmaq people owe to one another. And as such, we are all treaty people. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome everyone today, regardless of your race, culture, nationality, faith, gender, sexual orientation, age, ability, or income level. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight. And like we mentioned earlier before, but for those of you who are just joining us now, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share preferred pronouns if you feel comfortable with that. We're just really glad to have you all here tonight for what's going to be a wonderful conversation about with some wonderful people. So I would like to introduce those people right now. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce both of our amazing guest speakers. And first off, we have Ally Chant from ACAP Cape Breton. Ally holds a Bachelor of Science with a double major in Psychology and Music from Dalhousie University, and she joined the ACAP team in July 2020 when she took on the role of Trashformers Coordinator, which is a wonderful program that we're going to be hearing a bit about more throughout this discussion likely. And then we also have Jessica Frenette from the Living Earth Council based in Truro, of which she is chair of, and where she helps to lead action on a number of different environmental campaigns, such as No Mo May, and a forum on municipal renewable energy projects within the Truro area. So we're so lucky to have both of them here tonight to share their experience and knowledge with us. And I'm really looking forward to going into discussion with them and then hearing any questions that any of you may have afterwards for them as part of our Q&A, which you can participate in by submitting questions for them throughout the chat at any time throughout this discussion. So yeah, I guess without further ado, let's get into it. So thank you both so much for being here. And to start us off, could you both give me a short kind of summary overview of your organizations, just to give people a little bit of background on what each of your organizations does? And I guess we'll start with Jessica.
Thanks, Sophia, and thanks for having me here tonight. So as Sophia said, I am the chair of the Living Earth Council, so we call it the LEC for short. So it's an environmental group based out of Truro. The LEC works to inspire sustainable communities in Truro and the surrounding area by promoting green energy, active transportation, healthy landscapes, and local food. So currently we're working on a tree planting event with the local tree committee in Truro. So basically they sell trees every year for $10 a piece, and we are volunteering to plant those trees for anybody that may not be able to plant them themselves. And other things that we're working on right now is an active transportation event, so trying to promote active transportation with the local bike communities and bike shops in Truro. And like Sophia said, we did do our No Mo May this spring, which was our first year doing it. It was very successful. So we passed out pollinator-friendly seeds, lawn signs, and posters for No Mo May, and it was a really popular event. So next year, I think we're going to have to build on it. And it was really neat to see too. The grass got very long, but so did the dandelions. And I'll pass it on to Ally.
Thank you so much, guys. It is an absolute pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you, Sophia, for everything. So I work for ACAP Cape Breton, and we are in just about our 30th year of operation. We're a small nonprofit operating out of Cape Breton, and our focuses are environmental action and education, and we are known for educational activities, our stream and habitat restoration projects, as well as My Baby, the Trashformers program. We were established around 1991, and we focus on ways to get folks actively involved in discussing and addressing environmental issues. We make a conscious choice to work hard as an educator, and the focus is and has been on helping people to understand the issues and encouraging constructive ways to reconcile different perspectives. We ground our work in hard data and scientific knowledge.
Yeah, so as you can tell, we both have two people from amazing organizations working really hard in their communities. So I'm really looking forward to discussing more of the projects and knowledge that you have to share with us. So this one also kind of relates to our organizations as well. Was there an inciting moment or incident that inspired the founding of these organizations? And was there a reason that you decided to focus on primarily community-based action? I guess we'll go to Ally first. I guess we'll switch it up.
Cool. So ACAP was actually established through Environment Canada's Atlantic Coastal Action Program, which is what ACAP stands for. So we built upon the work by other community groups, which was the Harbor Rescue and Memorial Junior Highs Recycling Club that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And they were seeking to raise the profile of local environmental concerns. And we just kind of stepped in originally with volunteers and helped, and then we're who we are today. The reasons that we kind of take this community-based approach is so that us as humans can become better operators in our environment. We see that nature is not a resource, and the focus should be living as a part of nature and healing our relationship with nature. We want to really foster those healthy environments for future generations, and we know that real change is systemic. So it takes a community.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, the LEC started in 2007. I was not a member at that time. So basically there was a group of more or less friends that were worried about the climate change and the climate crisis and wanted to do something about it. So the founders felt the urgency for the climate crisis and wanted to work locally to make change happen. So they felt like local action could make a difference and often is more achievable. And since then, the LEC has continued to focus on the climate-based action. So we do have some annual events, but we also do events, just as things come up as we have members that are interested. So like we have our CD Saturday event, we usually do an Earth Day repair cafe, which unfortunately did not happen this past year due to COVID, but hopefully this coming spring. And then, like I said, No Mo May was a new one for us this year, so that's something we will continue with. As well, we've been working on a renewable energy project, so lots of new things coming up, as interest kind of spark and things start to go. Yeah.
Awesome. It's really cool as well that both of them were really started around people, which I think is what community-based organizations are really good at doing, is really bringing people together, because it is all about people doing, everyday things in their everyday lives, not necessarily these huge organizations, but making just as impactful a change in their communities as these large organizations do as well. So that's awesome. So yeah, our next question are, so there are many stakeholders, as I'm sure you're both aware, in encouraging environmental and sustainable practices, including government, businesses, NGOs, and the public. So what roles do you see all of them playing in achieving a sustainable future? I guess we'll go back to Jessica first then.
Perfect. So with government, I think a big thing is implementing policies that would create a green future. So that's something we are trying to encourage in our municipality right now. So such as requirements for new building structures. So regarding energy efficiency, renewable energy, green spaces, the protection of current landscapes and trees as well. So that's something we have a counselor on board right now who is in love with trees, and he's so passionate about it. It's great. So all the new developments, every time he's like, what are you doing to the trees? What are you going to do about the trees? And I just love it. It's so great. So another thing is holding companies responsible, of course, for their carbon outputs, as well as their waste. So that's to kind of help move forward to that circular economy. So with businesses, I think a big thing is obviously making products that are more environmentally friendly and not just greenwashing the public. So reducing packaging, allowing customers to bring in their own refillable containers when possible, using sustainable materials to develop their products, and preferably trying to get these materials local as possible. Also using green practices. So as simple as switching to paperless billing and paperless coupons, so sending these things to the mail, even that can just, can make a huge difference. So starting with those small steps and building on those, of course. So NGOs, I really see those as the advocates. So they're kind of advocating for the move forward to a green economy. So working with government to make these changes and educate the public on why we need to be concerned about the climate crisis and what they can do to help. So I really see the NGOs as kind of being the middleman, so kind of between the public and government and businesses. And also a big thing would be rewarding or recognizing businesses and organizations that are making positive change. I think that's a big thing too. Like if there's a business that's really done a lot in the community, they need that recognition, that reward, and then it kind of encourages other businesses and organizations to kind of follow suit. And the public, so of course, making sure that those in charge know what we want and what we expect from them. So really putting that pressure on them as much as we can. Making smart choices about who we elect. So really looking into politics. I know the politics can be very boring. I actually recently ran for my town council, which is definitely not something I ever thought I would do, because I've never been super into politics or interested in that area at all. But it was that desire to make a change and to really see something happen. I did not get in, but I learned so much during that process and so much about how to get into the municipality and make change happen. So it was a very rewarding experience anyways. And of course, making individual changes. So based on your diet, trying to turn to more of a plant-based diet. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just eliminating some of that. Waste reduction, which is something I'm very passionate about. Supporting local, and of course, like transportation. If you have the option to take public transportation, you have the option to bike or walk to work, give that a try. It doesn't have to be every day, but even a couple times a week. Those little things do make a big difference in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Ally?
All right, so I really resonated with a lot of the points Jessica made. A couple of them are really similar to ones I wanted to make, so I'm not going to repeat myself on those at all. Jessica did a really great job there. So one of the first points that I wanted to make is for all of these entities inclusive, benefit from remembering that we live and breathe and work and act on unceded Mi'kmaq land. We should be looking towards traditional knowledge to inform our methods. The Mi'kmaq act with the benefit in mind of 7 generations ahead, thinking of the future and acting for their great-great-great-grandchildren. Preserving a healthy environment is so crucial to this. If government and businesses value the land, preserve intact ecosystems, and reduce development in natural spaces, then we can begin to combat cumulative loss. Each further development harms the environment more and more. Building on pre-existing developments instead of continually disturbing existing and thriving ecosystems will preserve ecological function going forward. And how this kind of spreads is the government has the largest responsibility as a whole. Permits, taking accountability, apologizing, that's the first step for governments. For businesses, it's needing to hold the government accountable, shifting the perspective to valuing land as needed, holding themselves accountable for packaging, for what they put out into the environment and how they directly impact the ecosystems around offices, and even further in terms of like roads that have to be built to get places, thinking critically on where you are developing. For NGOs, I'm just going to touch on kind of what we see as ACAP's role, which is to foster a strong value for intact ecosystems and their natural functions. So my work with Trashformers is essentially picking up all those pieces that are left behind from businesses, from individuals, from, we see a lot, and we know that this then changes the public, where while things happen on a very large scale, it really is the small changes that can make a big difference. Picking up litter while you go for a walk, or writing a letter to your counselor to explain concerns in your community. That's the kind of stuff that the public can do.
Yeah, no, I think it's really amazing too how much impact one person can have. And I don't think that's something that we're necessarily grow up, thinking can actually happen, because we do live in a world where there's a lot of really big things that are kind of all seem so far above us and seem like they're making so much more of a change. But if you're one and someone else is one, then automatically that's doubled it. And if you keep going on and adding one, then it becomes a huge movement and you can really affect actual change. So I think that's really amazing and something that's super important to remember when thinking about community-based action. I did want to follow up on a point that kind of both of you had made about kind of the interconnectedness of it all, which is definitely something that is very much a part of the environmental movement. And specifically, Jessica mentioned that she recently ran for office. And I think this goes then into talking about individual action as well. Do you think that a part of community-based environmental action is encouraging more people to run for government and to get people who aren't typically in government involved in being a councillor or being even, you know, a member of parliament at different levels, and just really encouraging those people who might not necessarily even think about that as an option to go out?
I would agree with that 100%. Like I said, that was not something I'd ever thought of doing. It was just, I had a lot of the people from the LEC and a lot of my friends that are involved in the environmental movement. They kind of pushed me to do it, and it was definitely out of my comfort zone completely the whole time. I was so scared. I was so nervous. But at the same time, a lot of people got really excited to see a young candidate. Mm-hmm. I was the youngest candidate. I was the only female candidate in my ward. And a lot of people were excited that I didn't have a political background. Like, I wasn't going into it for the politics. I was going into it to make the change happen. And it was even, you know, like I said, I didn't get in, but I learned so much. And I feel like I have a little bit more power in the community in a way. Because now the counselors know my face, they know who I am. So when they see me, you know, a lot of them will say hi and stuff. But now kind of when I start to voice my opinion a little bit more, I feel like it has a little bit more push, like a little bit more power behind it. Because they're like, oh, you know, that was the one that I was in competition with. So it's really neat that way. I really would love to see more young people get involved in politics, a more diverse group get involved in politics as well. So 100%, I would love to see that.
Yeah, I would completely agree. It's really important to change up the voices that are advocating for our communities. I feel like it's kind of been the same for the last many years, or at least like in my lifetime. And it's time.
Yeah, I very, very much feel that as well. As someone with a bit of a political background myself, got into it for environmental reasons to make a change. Definitely important. I think it also really helps individuals not only go on to then hopefully change the system and make real change, but also kind of find change in themselves as well. As Jessica mentioned, that after that, she felt that her opinions had more weight when she spoke and that people were listening a little bit more. So I think even if it's not the people you're impacting outside of it, but even just realizing that your opinions do matter and that, you know, you could be prime minister or something like that and have these opinions that the world would listen to. I think that's really important as well. So definitely great conversation and great perspective from both of you. So yeah, our next question. So this one's a bit more of a kind of on the ground, day-to-day environmental work question. How do you get individuals engaged and interested in the local resources and opportunities around them? And I guess we'll go to Ally for this one first.
This is a really, really loaded question. So to start off, there isn't a right answer, and everything that I say that we do might not be the best or the brightest, but it's how we kind of operate in our day-to-day. So we kind of promote these barrier-free spaces. We try to hit social media, but also off social media, so that those that don't necessarily have smartphones or computers can also be involved. We have our landlines operating full-time so people can reach out by phone, and we do get quite a few phone calls of people almost weekly asking about cleanups and stuff. And I'm really excited that we're able to offer that, because technology can be limiting factor for a lot of people in our communities. We also use iNaturalist a lot. There's a lot of citizen-based science programs where you can ID plants and take photos and engage with your environment and have actual scientists like right in your pocket that confirm IDs, do data sharing. You can learn about ecosystems. We try to promote cleanups in your own community, especially with COVID. It has been so hard to get people engaged in person.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to do like virtual cleanups and more virtual events. Talks like this are really great for getting people engaged, because you can sit at home and not have to be in a space with anybody else. We do cross all social media platforms. So we just got a TikTok today to kind of promote our trash picking and litter picking. And yeah, it's a really, really, if it was non-COVID times, I would have so much more to share with you. But my brain is just kind of like, keeps going back to just the online stuff, which I know has been a huge barrier.
Definitely been, I think, the struggle for pretty much any social change group is reaching out to people purely online and trying to keep people engaged when we're not able to be there in person. Yeah, definitely something we've all been struggling with this past year. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in the years to come, not as much as an issue. Jessica?
So for our group, this is something we've actually have struggled with in the past, and of course with COVID as well. So it's interesting to see, hear it from Ally, some of her perspective there. So with COVID, of course, it's been a lot of social media right now. Hopefully we're getting into the in-person soon, because the social media, like you say, it really only targets one group. It doesn't target anyone that doesn't have Facebook, Instagram, those kind of things. So we do have quite a few members with the LEC, but unfortunately it tends to be mostly the board that takes on the work. So we can only do so much because there's only, I think, 6 of us board members, and we all have other volunteer roles, of course, as well. So one thing that we really try and focus on is the sense of community, because we do feel this is a way to kind of achieve that push and that momentum forward, and trying to focus on the positives. So not what we cannot do, but what we can do.
Yeah.
So a lot of times with the climate crisis, there's a lot of doom and gloom, and it can make you feel really hopeless. So really trying to keep our content positive, our activities positive and inspiring to keep you motivated, and just kind of keep you fighting and pushing for the change. A big thing too is also asking the members what things they're interested in and what they want to learn about. One thing that we did find was interesting is last spring we started a cleanup group actually. And we were very busy with it. People were really excited to get out because nobody was working. Most people were stuck at home, and we do groups of 5 or 10, whatever we were allowed at the time. And then this year, with now people are back to work, we've hardly done any cleanups because nobody has the time. So it was really cute. It was really nice to see last year how when people were at home, they were more aware of the litter. They wanted to do something about it. But unfortunately now where they just don't have the time, it's hard to get that motivation and hard to get them out there. But yeah, of course, COVID's definitely made things a little harder to get that engagement and that interest, but we're struggling through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it's pretty much, doing the best you can with what you've got. You both seem like you've found different solutions to work around it, which I think really speaks to the innovation that individuals are having to face when they go through difficult times, which is never a bad thing, to be constantly learning and figuring out new solutions. And then it does make you appreciate the ones that you were doing before all that much more. So I imagine once we start doing more in-person events, they're just going to be that much more of an exciting thing to have. And hopefully we'll have a lot of people coming out to a whole bunch of in-person events after all of this, because we'll all want to see each other. So that's awesome. All right, next question. So what pre-existing projects or infrastructure do you think communities can build off of, and what are some core new practices that you think are helpful to put in place? So when you're going into a community and you're trying to build up some kind of environmental movement or environmental change within the area, what are some of the things that you think are good to build off of, and what are some things that you want to implant that are completely new that communities usually don't have?
So one thing that I would love to see is, of course, communities take the current retrofit projects, energy reduction programs, and really build on them. So making them more accessible, not only financially, but also what type of projects they can be used on. Because usually, the rules with that is very strict, and they don't have that full variety quite yet. Another thing that I would love to see is more community gardens. So community gardens really being built onto. So not just more community buildings community gardens in neighborhoods that may not have their own land to use those, or land to make their own gardens, but as well as education around it. So educating the members on gardening tips, healthy recipes you can make with your garden goodies. So really making that sense of community with it. If, when COVID is kind of past us, having like community meals with, with the things that you grow in your garden. So really that sense of community with it. Another thing, like Nova Scotia has always been known for its provincial recycling system. However, recently we're really coming to realize that our efforts are not enough to truly tackle the waste problem in the province. So I'd love to see Nova Scotia really start to step up to the plate again and really become that, that top notch, like the well-known for their recycling program. So also like waste reduction, of course, in the province, increasing the compost programs, and putting rules in place to ensure that waste is properly sorted. Of course, it'd be great to see businesses as well have to look into their food waste a little bit more and have more options instead of just throwing everything out. So really building on, of course, what's there. And like I kind of said earlier, like for new practices, really a focus on sustainability around new infrastructures. So if you're going to build something new in your town, your municipality, there should be rules around that. There should be rules around the sustainability, the energy efficiency, the landscape, all of that. And of course, like I was saying earlier too, holding companies accountable for their carbon outputs. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm sure Ally has more to add to that.
I do. Once again, you touched on so much of the same stuff that I wanted to. So community gardens was a big one for me. I'm not going to go back into that. I think you did a really great job. Some things that I noticed, especially with my job, are we get to see the breakdown of litter across communities. We get to see the impact in busier areas and more rural areas, in forested areas. We cover the entirety of the CBRM, and we have statistical data backing up litter since 2011, which is huge. So some of the things that I've noticed that are really crucial for clean, healthy, and sustainable communities are safe injection sites, safe sharps disposal sites, and cigarette butt disposal sites. I think if we could implement more, like people are going to smoke, there's nothing we're going to do to stop them. We've been campaigning for however many years. I hope none of you are smokers, but they often see the world as kind of their ashtray, and that's one of the most prevalent pieces of litter in all communities. Even just yesterday, we picked up 600 cigarette butts in about 3 hours while collecting other trash. So I think having those receptacles is a really, really important thing for all communities, and that kind of encourages, if they're there, people will use them. Like it's true. One of the core practices that I think is really, really important for communities is to, as I mentioned earlier, develop only in pre-developed areas, leave old growth forests, leave those kind of places to soak up the water, to, move flooding, mitigate all that sort of stuff. It's really important. Like nature has been there, and nature has built up all these magical ways of preventing flooding and keeping itself sustained. And when we go in and start messing with that, we don't know how far into the future we're actually impacting. Developing in these developed areas only is the best way to set ourselves up for climate change resiliency. And this allows developments the opportunity to preserve ecosystems as well as our future. And then just kind of circling back to the litter is, I'm sure everyone here knows about the garbage patches and the devastating effects of all the debris in our oceans and stuff. It's terrible. And we need to have public recycling bins more available, more public garbage cans. They might be an eyesore or whatever, I guess, but litter is more of an eyesore, and the impact on the environment is so much greater. And I guess I'll hand it back over to you, Sophia.
No, those are all really amazing perspectives. Especially, I think it's really interesting how, like, again, we keep coming back to the kind of this theme of these small little things that actually end up making such huge differences, like community gardens, which, are not necessarily, like, they don't take a ton of money or even that much time to set up necessarily. And especially when you have a community of people coming together and all working on them. And then, like you mentioned, Ally, the different having recycling and garbage disposal and just general waste disposal things out and about. Like, people are going to use them if they're there, and it's not that hard to set out a bin and paste a label on it that says garbage. It's really not. And if it's right there, people are going to deliberately choose to, do the wrong thing if they have an easy option to do something that they don't even have to think about. So I think that's really a really important point for a lot of things, is that these small little projects really can make a whole bunch of difference, and that you really can kind of make a change by instating those in communities as well. So I think that's really awesome. Thanks so much. All right. So I think we've touched on this a bit throughout the conversation, as it just kind of naturally comes up. But what are some barriers to working on sustainability in communities? And I guess we'll go with Ally.
All right, so sustainability is a privilege. Environmental racism is racial discrimination in environmental policymaking and enforcement of regulations and laws, the deliberate targeting of communities of color for toxic waste facilities, the official sanctioning of the presence of life-threatening poisons and pollutants for communities of color, and the history of excluding people of color from leadership of the environmental movement. And this was actually published in a book in 1994, and I can't say that I've noticed any change in that. We have the data going back 10 years, and there is a significant more amount of litter in these poorer areas. And I don't think it's the problem of the people who live there, it's the system. And for the sustainability space to be truly inclusive, it has to be intersectional. So intersectional sustainability is an inclusive version of environmentalism that advocates for both the protection of people and the planet. So geographic associations between pollution or waste sites and low income or minority communities, which I've already touched on, but we have the data that backs it up. So how do we change that? When it comes to vulnerable communities, these issues intertwine with basic daily needs. So like housing, food, healthcare, those are more urgent real world problems than sustainability for people living in crisis. So in order to be truly sustainable in communities, we have to first build those communities up. We have to provide, better housing, affordable housing. We have to provide community gardens and spaces to get free vegetables, free fruits, that sort of stuff. And with that, we can build sustainability naturally. But as we've said time and time again, everything takes small little steps. So if we're leaving out all of these other communities, but we're building these big green spaces in town, is that really a more sustainable place? Or are we just kind of greenwashing what we're doing with more developed and urban areas and leaving those others behind? There's a lot more that I really want to say, but I'm going to cut myself off there and pass it over to Jessica before I get a little too heated.
That was such a great answer, Ally. Like, that was amazing. And like, I love how you're really talking about how everything's connected with sustainability. So that was something I've really noticed and kind of learned during my environmental, education. So like when I really started worrying about the environment and looking into sustainability, I would really only see the narrow right in front of me, saving the trees, reducing waste. But you start to see the whole thing and how it's connected. Like you're saying, racial issues, inequality, affordable housing, everything is connected. And like for a sustainable community, you have to look at all these issues. You can't just fix one. It's not going to fix the whole system. You have to deal with each of the issues, and they kind of build on one another. So it's eye-opening when you really start to notice that, and just how connected everything is. So one thing personally we have had a hard time with the LEC is getting funding. So a lot of times, because we've got a small municipality, whenever we bring project forward or ideas to the municipality, like right now we're working on a renewable energy project, so trying to get some renewable energy in our community. They always just kind of come back, we don't have the funding. Like, it's a great idea, but we don't have the funding. So that's something that we're trying to figure out right now, is how you get the funding for these projects. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, yes, there is a benefit long-term financially, but in the short term, all they see is a lot of money coming out of their pockets. So another issue, of course, is kind of the difference of opinions. So like the difference between what's priority and what someone may think is, what's their opinion. So that's something we've dealt with other groups and with council as well. Because, they want to focus on certain things that they might think are better for the community, when in the long run, there's other issues that really need to be dealt with. So that's something that we've definitely struggled with and have found as a barrier for sustainability. And of course, having municipality, like a lot of our councillors that did get elected this last fall definitely have sustainability on their mind, but we do have still a lot of old school councillors who don't really see the benefit of sustainability. So we're trying to kind of frame it in a different sense. So instead of focus on the environmental aspect of it, kind of trying to focus on more the economy and trying to frame it in a different way, which is disheartening because I would love to just talk about, environment, systemic racism, like all these big issues, but sometimes you do have to kind of turn it on its side to make other people really see the need for the change there. Yeah, but honestly, Ally's answer, like she covered so much right there, and that was very passionate and well spoken for sure.
That was very, very well said. It really, yeah, it's all connected. We can't solve one thing without also trying to solve another thing, which then I think also makes ideally the environmental movement would be more intersectional and more inclusive and we'd be reaching out to people who say, well, I do care about the environment, but also something that's also important to me is systemic racism. And I don't want to feel like if I'm in the environmental movement that I can't also focus my work on that, because they're 100% all leading into each other and all part of the same problem. And the solutions to all of them are all interconnected because without one, again, we can't have the other. So I think that's something really important as well, just to get the general population in general more on board also with environmentalism, is realizing that, yeah, this could be a really amazing intersectional inclusive space where we kind of deal, it's dealing with all of humanity's problems instead of just one problem, because it's all connected. So yeah, definitely a really, really amazing point. Thank you both so much for that. All right, so we've got our last formal question from me before we go into any questions that the audience may have after that wonderful discussion. So here's my finishing up question. So being an environmentalist can be pretty lonely sometimes. So that sense of community and finding others who share your passion is so important. So what advice would you give to any individuals on this call who want to get involved and make a change in their community, but don't quite know where to start?
I would suggest join a local group, find those people that have the same passion as you. It is so true that being an environmentalist can be very lonely and disheartening at times, especially if your friends and family don't share that passion with you. And it's easy to kind of focus on all the negativities going on in the world and really get sucked into that sense of hopelessness. I've been there, I understand that. But having a group of people that share your passion and you can really work with, it makes you feel more powerful. It makes you feel like you can accomplish a goal and actually make a change happen. Every meeting that I go to with the LAC, I just feel really refreshed after. I feel like I can go and make a change in the world, and I feel like we're actually making something happen. So that is a big thing. Find that community, find those people. Because without them, it is really hard to do anything. It's really hard to keep positive and keep motivated. So you've got to find your tribe and stick with them.
100%.
So I guess building on that is how to find that community. So that's what I'm going to tell you. So I got into environmentalism while I was at Dalhousie, and I did not know anybody who was into it. I didn't know how to go about it. My roommates weren't recycling. It was just this weird place where I felt really alone and really vulnerable, I guess, in my defense of my actions. So some ways that I because I didn't do a sustainability degree. I didn't study this at university. I studied psychology and just had a huge passion for it and didn't think I'd ever get into this field. So the first step to kind of getting yourself in it is to look for forums. So Reddit has some really, really great resources. There's some great discussion boards and stuff, some subreddits that you can get in and get that information and talk with other people with the same interests. TikTok has been an incredible resource. There are so many people out there doing really cool things that have these really great platforms, and you can really build these online relationships that foster everything you believe in and get that education as well. Even just attending calls like this is huge. Scouring Facebook and such, the like, are great resources. And then getting out there and showing up. What does that mean exactly? So I make a point every time I see someone picking out garbage on the side of the road, I usually pull over and ask them like what they're doing, if they need help. I try and like talk to them. And I find like, even when I'm like out at the beaches alone picking up and stuff, people approach me and they're like, oh, this is so cool. What are you doing? I really enjoy that. I find the environmental community is quite inclusive. We all kind of gravitate to each other because we know that struggle of being alone. Joining a committee or a board of directors. So most of these are all volunteer based. There's always committees out there looking for members. We are operated by a board of directors, and I know that they go through cycles with who they have in them. Community groups like Jessica mentioned, I started volunteering with ACAP when I was 14 or 15. And when I moved back to Cape Breton after finishing university, I just jumped right back in with the volunteer stuff. I've done some volunteering with Dylan and the Cape Breton Environmental Association, and I've made some really great connections through that. And then as well, so to do cleanups and such, it can be sometimes hard to access materials. How do you get garbage bags? How do you get pickers? How do you get that stuff? How do you get started? If you are in Cape Breton, we offer that. We will give you pickers, we will give you garbage bags, we'll give you gloves. You can get a group together yourself. We lend them out for 48 hours at a time. So it's not like you have to borrow them and then bring them right back. We do allow for that. If you're doing a cleanup here during the summer months and need some like assets getting your stuff to solid waste or picked up, we offer that as well. We do in normal times do a lot more community-based events. With everything that's been going on, that's been a lot harder. But we are doing one this week where we kind of just said, show up, you can borrow stuff from the truck, and then you can just kind of go off on your own. So it's still being involved, but you're really not being with people so much. And then just reaching out onto anyone on social media who's doing what you want to be doing. I can't tell you the amount of messages I get on my personal social media, just being like, hey, how did you get into this? What are you doing? And they bring me such joy. Like I would never reply to one of those and be like, oh no, I'm not telling you. Like I want to tell you, I want to get you involved. And I feel like most people in this community have that energy about them. So just don't be scared, I guess, is my main advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really cool because I think there are a lot more resources out there than people even know. I mean, this is only partially because I work in this field, so I firsthand know about all the different amazing projects that are out there. But I think it's really important for, you know, if you're interested in dipping a toe in, and maybe you find one group and that group leads to another group, and eventually, you know, you find a group that really speaks to you and really is doing things that you're interested in doing. So yeah, I think that's really cool that people have those options, like you mentioned, that ACAP's offering to kind of support them through that learning process, and that there are events like the LEC is doing that they can attend and learn more about how they can be getting involved. So yeah, that's amazing. So we have about 10 minutes left in our call. If anyone has any questions for either of our two wonderful presenters, please do feel free, excuse me, to put them in the chat, because we'd love to hear from you about any questions that you may have. Oh, and Murray's just mentioning to me that, well, people may be thinking of questions. Someone mentioned something about a youth council to Jessica in the chat. I don't know if you've seen that, Jessica, and I'll try to find it. You recently had a youth council form in your municipality.
Yeah, so we actually have one of our old board members, she did get elected to council. So this was kind of her baby. So that was one of her big projects when she got elected. So they just formed probably within like the last 2 months. So they haven't done a whole lot yet. But it was really exciting because she does work at one of the local schools. And she had a group of students come up and just kind of say, like, you know, we're interested in environmental work, and we'd like to be involved with council. We'd like to kind of see that policy change, make things happen. So yeah, that's really exciting, and we're really we feel really positive about what they can do in the future. And it, you know, we really do think it's important to have that youth voice, because unfortunately, youth don't have the chance to vote. So at least if they could get their voice in there and really get to talk to the counselors and like to just tell them what they want to change, what they want to see happen, because it is their future. So like I said, though, they just started on like a month or two ago. So not a whole lot's happened yet, but we're really excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing project. I'm newly turned 18 myself, so always very passionate about hearing about youth activities, especially in the environmental sector, because it's definitely tough when you can't vote and you can't really do much, it feels, to people in power. So I really love seeing it, especially when environmental groups are trying to be inclusive of youth and really give them a voice, as I've kind of found with NSEN, that they don't usually get the opportunity to have. Thanks for sharing. None of my friends are really environmentalists. They understand the environmental thing and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's save the planet, sure. But it's not necessarily a full-time thing for them as it is for me. So that's awesome when we're able to kind of find people who also have that passion.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that, Dylan, what you had in the chat there. That's kind of how I felt too. Like for a long time, my friends kind of made fun of me and poked fun, and I was like the environmental police. That's what everyone would call me, because if I went to a picnic, I'd bring my own utensils and my water bottle and stuff like that. And I think sometimes you got to just kind of brush that off. Like, you are going to be made fun of. Unfortunately, there's always going to be those people that poke fun with you. So honestly, I kind of started making a joke about it too. But you do start to see even my non-environmental friends, they have made small changes in their lifestyle just because of being around me. Like, a lot of them use water bottles where they never would have before. And they're just kind of getting into that mindset of recycling more. So like you said, like, it can be really hard at first, but you just kind of got to brush that off and keep pushing through. And that's really amazing, Dylan. So you've really made good progress with that.
It was amazing. Ally, I know you spoke on this kind of a little bit earlier, that you had been taking your degree in psychology and music, and then you kind of had a moment where you then got into environmentalism. If you don't mind sharing, was there like an inciting moment that you're like, yes, this makes sense. This is what I, want to get involved with more?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in an extraordinarily sustainable home. My mom was using reusable grocery bags my whole life, like from I was a toddler when we started using it. I'm almost 30 now. So I grew up just where everything was so innate that I just thought that was a way of life. Like, I didn't realize that people weren't. I guess I come from a much different background than I'm sure a lot of people on this call. So when I went off to university, I didn't realize that sustainability wasn't ingrained in everybody the same way it was ingrained in me. So after a few years of school, I finished out my degree, and then I was like, this isn't what I want to be doing at all. Like, I really want to make a difference, and I want to transition back into this life. And I moved home. I applied to work at ACAP, and here we are.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so it really just came down to me realizing that, like, the way I was living, while it may have been gentle, was not the way that everyone else was living. And I just really felt incited to change that. So kind of what we say with Trashformers and with ACAP is every little bit helps, which is a true testament to small changes add up to really big changes. So even like with my friends, I'm never going to tell them to change every aspect of their life right away. Like, if I can just get that one friend who throws cigarette butts on the ground to start butting out in a like coffee cup or in an ashtray, like, that's a huge win for me. I don't want them to change their whole personality, but I really, really aspire to at least help make little changes across the board.
That's amazing. I grew up in a vegan household, so kind of similar, we had our own gardens, we went to the farmer's market every weekend. Like, it was very much how I grew up. And then I started interacting with people more in my teen years. And I'm like, okay, never mind, maybe it isn't. How everyone immediately is like, yeah, let's bring our own water bottles and stuff like that, like Jessica mentioned. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of a culture shock, but it's awesome that you're able to kind of rub off on people as well, and then just have that be the example that they see. Jessica, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Oh no, so I definitely grew up in a more environmental household than my friends. I wouldn't say like we were completely sustainable in any manner. but we did always have like our own garden. My mother was really strict with recycling and like food waste and stuff like that. And a lot of it was we just kind of grew up more low income. So a lot of it was like, you don't waste things because we can't afford to. But once you get into the real world, one thing that really boggled my mind was how many of my friends didn't recycle. Like that was just like, I just couldn't believe that there's people still that don't recycle. So like you're saying, like it was a really mind-opening time in my life. And I think the thing that really pushed me into environmentalism was actually, well, yeah, seeing the garbage patches, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The first time I ever heard about that, of course, I looked it up. I just freaked out. And from there, I became very concerned about waste reduction. So that was something I became very passionate about. And from there, you just learn about everything else and it just kind of keeps adding up. So from there, it was like, you know, waste reduction, then food waste. And it just keeps going on to like diet, sustainability, and if you just keep building on from there. But yeah, it is neat how I kind of look back to the way we lived when I was younger and realized we did live much more sustainable than I thought. But I just thought that was a way of life, like you're saying. So once you realize that not everyone lives that way, it's kind of just like that moment where you're like, okay, like,
Yeah,
maybe we're a little different.
yeah, that's awesome. I see we're coming up on 8 o'clock now, so we're going to wrap things up. But thank you both so much for coming and speaking with us all tonight. You both shared such amazing thoughts and perspectives on, we really covered like a huge range of environmental issues because like we said, it's all interconnected. So that was absolutely amazing. And I know it was inspiring for me, and I hope it was inspiring for some other people on this call as well to hear about all the amazing work that you both do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
You're an incredible moderator. I loved your questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. I was so happy to do this. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, folks. Thank you so much. We are going to be putting this recording up on Facebook because unfortunately we were not able to stream to Facebook Live due to some aforementioned technical difficulties, but the recording will be available for anyone who was not able to make it, or if you know anyone who would have enjoyed participating in this discussion as well. And please check out both the LAC and ACAP to stay tuned on their amazing work, and NSEN as well. Thank you all so much, and hope you all have a great night. Bye.